Hello, and welcome to After Scientology, Straight Up and Vertical, the weekly show where Tony Ortega and I get together and go over the week's events and the world of Scientology as reported on Tony's Substack. Hey, Tony, welcome back to the show.
Great to be here, Chris.
Yes, big time. And we have some interesting, fun things to talk about this week. This last week had some interesting moments, starting with something that really confused me. And I'm clearly just don't know who this guy is or the significance of this, but you reported on this interesting thing out of Ireland. This guy, Terry McMahon, made a video endorsing Scientology out there. And apparently he's a celebrity, but not a Scientologist.
Yeah, and I got even more confirmation of that. I also got, I can't say how I know this, but he apparently was complaining that I attacked him. But I
Really?
think if you read it, you will see I did nothing of the sort. I said that this is the kind of thing Scientology needs desperately, are endorsements by non-Scientologist celebrities. I mean, they can barely get their own celebrities to say anything publicly.
That's right.
But apparently this has actually been on the Facebook page of the Dublin org for some time, but I just noticed it. Somebody brought it to my attention. And they had passed the 5-year anniversary of the creation of the Dublin Ideal Organ Community Center in Firhouse, which is the suburb of Dublin. And we don't hear too much about the place. I've posted some flyers over the last few years showing that in order to staff it, they've had to bring in people from places like the Czech Republic and Hungary because there's virtually no Scientologists in Ireland itself. I think at the last national census, there were literally 87 Scientologists in the entire country.
Yeah.
So, once again, an ideal org has been built there, not because there's any demand for it, but simply because it's part of Miscavige's program of trying to convince the, wealthy donors that things are going well.
That's right.
And so for this 5th anniversary, the Dublin org had somehow convinced this local celebrity to make this, I think, kind of amazing endorsement. Terry McMahon is a pretty well-known writer, director, and actor in Ireland. His biggest credit over here was he had a small role in Batman Begins back in 2005. But he's primarily known for a couple of films he made himself in Ireland. And he's a talented guy, and you can tell from the way he wrote that or spoke that thing about saying that the Dublin org, by staying open during pandemic time, had basically was a sacred space that had saved Irish culture, which is a pretty big claim. But it's just a really a skillful person putting together very impressive endorsement. And it's the kind of thing you never hear for Scientology. So that's what struck me. How did it strike you?
Well, it struck me, it was very odd because it was so lucid and it was so clear and it was so well, almost poetic.
Yeah.
I mean, it was such a beautiful endorsement of something that I know and is so incredibly disgusting that you're like, what did they tell this guy? Are you sure he's not a Scientologist? Because that's the first thing I thought was.
I got more confirmation of that he is not a Scientologist. I mean, he's obviously had some sort of interaction with them, but I'm pretty sure he's not a Scientologist and definitely doesn't consider himself one.
Wow.
But that for some reason he felt that they deserve this kind of these kind of plaudits. And like I said, it got back to me that he said I was attacking him, and I really wasn't. I mean,
No.
I think anybody, just obviously pointing out that a celebrity has endorsed Scientology does come off as an attack to them because they, how, the public, I guess he thought that only a very small number of people would see this.
Well, I wonder if it wasn't one of those, oh no, this will just be internal. I mean, it's almost a mini version of the Tom Cruise turtleneck video, right? No, Tom, only the Scientologists will see this. Oh, well, then I can just say whatever, right? It's like Schwarzenegger's Japanese commercials. No, they'll only be in Japan. The other thing about Ireland that I've always found a little weirdly interesting about Scientology is Ireland's the place where Hubbard first set up what was called the PE Foundation or the PE course, the whole personal efficiency thing, and the beginning of learning how to rope people in off the street, basically, right? How do you, because they were doing intro lectures and stuff in Phoenix, but they weren't getting huge audiences and they weren't getting lots of new members. But Ireland is the place which is known Scientologically as the place where that was all figured out. And, the whole personality test line and all of that, I think, was part of that. And it was developed around the same time. So you have this sort of special recognition or not, legacy of Ireland somehow. And yet the reality of Ireland and Scientology is together, you said 87 people. There's nothing going on with Scientology in Ireland. And it was weird when they decided to make an ideal org there in this big community center there. But it felt to me like it was in the tradition of that old Irish legacy of Scientology, which simply was, I think, was a fantasy then and is still a fantasy now. So it was so weird to see someone of some actual stature and knowledge and skill put this thing out together. And it was just out of nowhere. It just came out of like, what? 5 years, really? And you're going to say,
I mean, if anything, it just reminds us how much of a pariah it normally is, and most people won't go near it.
Yeah, exactly. So it makes it stand out even more. It's just this
Yeah,
weird. It's like it would have been as weird if he had posted a video of a ringing endorsement of the Hare Krishnas or something. You'd be like, what are you doing? It's like that weird. Okay. So anyway, that was kind of fun. Another thing was just following up on the protest from last weekend. There was additional action during the week. And I think the guys, Alex and Jeff, were just as surprised as the rest of us at how it went down. What was that? You did a whole podcast with them. What was that story?
Yeah, he did something himself on YouTube, but I thought it'd be fun to talk about it. And he saved a couple of things for us at the bunker. But he and Jeff, who goes by PTS for Life, he's out of Canada. He had come over for the demonstration, and the two of them went up to see somebody in the north part of the country. And so they stopped in by the local org, which is something I'm sure you've done, which I've done, just to sort of
Sure.
look at it. And somebody opened the door and said, "Come on in." So they did. And what was fun about it was, somebody like Alex, somebody like Jeff, they can look around and notice things that maybe somebody else wouldn't. And they noticed right away the signs that this place is just so dead. They got a photo of the org board. It looked like there's only 3 staffers on the org board and only 30 bodies in the shop. And, this is a place that's supposedly raising money for a future ideal org. And it's just more evidence showing that, Scientology is virtually dead in most parts of the world, but they're pretending that it's still a going concern. And they had a lot of fun anecdotes about how they were treated, and that this poor Swedish volunteer that was showing them around kept apologizing. I mean, just the worst sort of way to sell. Oh, I know it doesn't look very nice. What do you think compared to the kind of stuff you were taught about how to handle somebody walking in the door?
Oh yeah, no, totally wrong. Totally wrong. You never soft sell ever. And that's not even soft sell. That's almost push away from me sell, right? That's like, no, you don't really want this. I mean, you're supposed to be like, hard sell, right? Insistence people buy, not putting up with any of the stops or reasons or barriers. And yeah, so she was clearly, obviously embarrassed by the circumstances. And who wouldn't be? 3 staff. That's the bare minimum. And I do mean the bare minimum. You can't run a Scientology org with 1 or 2 people. So 3, and they're not even organized the way you're supposed to be. I talked with Alex about this as well. So the whole thing is just a disaster on wheels. And I thought it was absolutely peak hilarious that they went there a day or two after they completely screwed over COB, right? Miscavige on his whole deal. And then they just wander over to this
Well,
org.
that was definitely that suggestion by Alex, that it also showed how sort of dysfunctional OSA is right now, that they didn't have alerts on these guys all over the country.
That's right.
So that's an interesting thing. And then the other thing that he saved for my podcast was that he was told that Volvo is operated on Hubbard admin tag. And when we were done laughing about that, and he literally called Volvo, and they said no.
Oh,
I thought, okay, so where does that come from? And my guess was that it was maybe a Volvo dealer had, some wise influence or something. Well, then Pan from the bunker found that that is the case, that there is a Volvo dealer who's a Scientologist. And that's probably where that's, sort of notion came from. Because, I mean, that's just classic Scientology. We see it over and over again where these little sort of urban myths bubble up and get spread around because people are looking for anything to say, oh, Scientology's involved in this, Scientology's doing this great thing. And so they just exaggerate everything.
oh, absolutely, absolutely, and that's total. That's just their internal PR, always. I mean, mind you, there are some stories about Scientology infiltrating companies that are a little disturbing, but thankfully Volvo isn't one of them. Yeah, you get that nonsense all the time. And the OSA dysfunction is no joke, man. They really, I mean, I'm sensing if Scientology deals with this the way they used to deal with this kind of stuff when I was in, then we're going to see Sea Org missions going into these places. Sunderland, even St. Hill, UK, might get an int level mission. And what that means is Miscavige is pissed off enough to send his attack dogs down there to kick ass and take names and straighten everybody up because they pulled in all this protest. See, at the end of, here's the horrible truth about Scientology is we're looking at the protests, we're kind of, enjoying the flavor of it and how good it was and how kind they were and compassionate. Miscavige is chewing the rug. And inside, the people who are being protested against are being blamed for this. And
Yeah.
so, we could see in the future, Sunderland might be getting,
What a waste of time that
around,
would be. What a
right?
waste of time and resources and money it would be to fire a mission up to Sunderland to get those people right because it's dead. Forget
Exactly.
about it.
Exactly. And it might be so dead. In fact, I'm saying this because I want people to kind of keep a little bit of who might notice these kind of things on the ground. Do so, because if you see signs of that, let me know. I'm actually thinking Scientology's so dead at this point, especially in the UK, that those missions aren't even going to happen. I think it's just going to be, uh, shrug, move on, whatever, no big deal, which is in the end a good thing for us.
Well, and I'm going to point out in my Substack Monday morning that they still keep trying, though. They have opened a new ideal mission. We're waiting for them to open up ideal orgs in Chicago and Austin that have been delayed for so long. But in the
Mm.
meantime, they opened a new ideal org facility in, I believe, Italy somewhere this weekend.
Oh, did they? Okay.
Yeah. So, I
Okay.
mean, they're
Still
still
going.
doing these little cosmetic things. I think it was just, and I think this one was just moving from one space to another. I don't even know if it was a whole refurbishment or anything like that. So,
Oh, it could have just been a reorganization of an existing mission into a bigger quarters or
but they
some.
made a big deal and they had a press release for that. But as of Sunday night when we're recording this, they still don't have out a press release about the IAS from last week.
Oh, how interesting.
Yeah.
How interesting. And of course, that's because the IAS event, or at least the first thing that comes to my mind is, well, that's a closed door private event. That's not for the public. See, I don't know. Maybe not. Okay, let's move on. We have another story, which was actually two. There were two updates in the legal arena this week. One, Masterson filed his appeal.
Yeah, I mean, the deadline was coming up. He had to file something within 60 days of the sentencing. And
Okay.
so this was just a notice of appeal. It just says, yeah, we're
Oh, okay.
appealing.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, it's the real interesting stuff will come later when they file a brief explaining what their appeal's about.
Right.
I'm thinking that's going to be more like January or February. I'm not
Okay.
sure, but actually, you know what? I think they might have to turn it in December. I saw a December date on that docket. So
Mhm.
maybe that's coming sooner than maybe it's only we'll have to wait about a month. But at this point, they just had to file a piece of paper that says yes, we're appealing. So
Okay,
that
got it.
that was expected.
All right.
I actually did
Oh,
ask Philip Cohen's PR person if they had a statement about it, and they didn't get back to me with anything. So, oh well.
okay, got it. Okay, good. So we'll get the substance of the appeal December, January
I think, and now that I think about it, I think it's about the middle of December.
okay.
And like I said, what I'm predicting is they're just going to go after Judge Olmedo an appeal. You can't really go over the facts again. You can't
Right.
dispute the facts of the appeals court. All you can do is dispute how the trial was conducted, and you can and so I expect they'll have a ton of stuff in the appeal about Judge Olmedo's rulings about how much Scientology to allow in. Cohen was also really upset that they allowed so much references to drugging when he wasn't actually charged with drugging anybody.
Mm,
Um, and there was the time he sort of, when Judge Olmedo cut short Philip Cohen's cross examination on Jane Doe 1, things like that, where the judge made a decision about what evidence to allow in and how much. That's what they're going to go after. And I know that the Masterson side feels that they have definite things to go after. And so that's what you'll see in this brief coming, like I said, maybe next month.
right. I guess the idea, maybe if I guess I'm saying this for the audience, but for myself as well. So with an appeal, you're not relitigating the case. You're not trying to say that fact isn't that fact. What you're trying to do is basically second guess everything the judge did in terms of all the decisions that were made procedurally along the way. Because, like, for example, that drugging thing, I mean, they haven't yet made their case. They're not saying that yet. We're thinking that's what they're going to say. But for me, you hear that and I think to myself, so what? Right? Who cares? Like that, they weren't charging him on the drugs, but the drugs were very clearly part of the rape. So how do you not talk about that? Right. And it's almost like it goes beyond nitpicky to the point of like, what the hell are you talking about? But that's
Well,
how
the
process
difference was, in the first trial,
mm-hmm.
the prosecutors were allowed to elicit testimony from the women that said, okay, how much did you have to drink? How did you feel afterwards? And the implication there is that then you allow the jury then to conclude, well, come on, one half of a drink and they're unconscious. There must have been something in that drink.
Right.
In the second trial, she allowed them to come out and say in their opening statements and their closing statements, Danny drugged these women and then raped them.
Right. Right.
And Cohen objected at that point, saying, you can't do that. He's not charged with drugging them. He's only charged with raping them. So the reason why I'm predicting that's going to be in the appeal is because that's what they were arguing about in court in the trial.
Oh, totally.
So
Totally legit.
they're gonna come
Yeah.
and say the judge should not have allowed that change between the first and second trial. The other thing that she allowed, remember in the first trial, she would not allow a Scientology expert. She would in the second trial. There's a little I've seen a little misconception going around that she did not allow Scientology in the first trial. That's not true. There was a lot of Scientology
Mm-hmm.
allowed in the first trial.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the differences between the first and second trial, for example, was in the second trial, Jane Doe 3 in particular had really great testimony about when she went to the church to talk about Danny had attacked me, the
Right.
specific things they put her through to basically punish her for coming forward.
Yep.
The ethics program, remember, she talked about the little items in the modeling kit to make sure she understood if she ever said anything about Masterson, she'd be totally destroyed and everything.
Yep.
That kind of particular detail about how Scientology worked at that level, that's what we heard a lot more about in the second trial. But there was a lot of Scientology in the first trial. But she allowed more, and she allowed Claire Headley to testify. So,
Right.
I can already predict what they're going to say in the appeal because we saw it during the trial that this is an attack on Danny Masterson's religion. Why is his religion on trial? That's what they're going to say, and hope that the appeals judges don't understand Scientology the way Judge Olmedo does, and see if they can't get a new trial order or something like that. So that's the game. Um, Megan Cuniff, who's really familiar with these cases at LA Superior Court, tells me that with a jury verdict, the appeals court was probably going to be reluctant to overturn it on stuff like that. But we'll see. I mean, that's the aim on the Masterson side.
Okay. And as a result of an appeals process, it's the case, it might be that it just gets dismissed out of hand and he is freed, or it goes to a new trial, or
I
is
mean,
it sometimes one of
more likely they will deny the appeal, or they will order a new trial. They'll say the judge made a mistake here. It was unfair to the defendant. Go do it again. That's more likely than to just acquit him. And that would be a huge result. But I don't, I think it's a long shot. I think, when you got all those weeks of testimony and a jury convicting, it's tough to overturn. But we'll see.
Yeah. Yeah, we will. We will. Hey, one thing I wanted to ask you about this, because somebody pointed this out to me recently, and it's a great point. Claire Headley was allowed to testify as an expert witness, and she does not have letters after her name. It was based on experience, and this is in a criminal, not civil trial. That's kind of new and different and exciting for the future of expert witnesses, ex-members, Scientology and otherwise, possibly. Did you have any thoughts about that?
Well, the judge went into that at some length, and the prosecutors did at the time. They talked about that quite a bit, and the judge did refer to case law or other examples where, like for example, gang members. How do you get a gang expert who was never in a gang? You know what I'm saying? And so,
Yes.
if you want a gang expert that really understands gangs, they may not necessarily have a master's degree or a PhD. You know, and so she went into that, and again and again in this, I think part of what was maybe Danny's bad luck in getting this judge is she's so experienced with these really serious felony cases, gang murders and stuff, and she's seen some really gritty things in court, and she would often draw that parallel, and that's the one that I definitely remember, is she's saying a gang expert may not have an academic degree, but they have the expertise of what happens in a gang. And so she made that parallel with Claire, that Claire may not have an advanced college degree, but she grew up in Scientology, and they explained her expertise and why she knows the text so well. So that was definitely something that they talked about in court. And um I remember Sean Hawley's comeback was kind of ridiculous because she asked Claire, she said, now you're OT4, is that right? And it's funny because Sean Hawley doesn't know anything about Scientology. Somebody must have explained this to her, right? But she was doing her best. And Sean Hawley said, now you're OT4, right? Yes, yes, I am. Well, doesn't it go to OT8? like like why do we have this rank amateur in here? There's only OT4.
Exactly.
It was funny. I had to do everything I could not to bust out the fawing in court because I could see what she was doing, but it was just so silly.
Very much so. Very much so. Well, that is funny. And I think it's a great point, and one to be highlighted there, because I think we're going to see that again in the future. And I think that's really very good. In fact, I laugh because as part of my research or study or education on coercive control, we studied gangs as well as cults because they're kind of the same thing. And so I just find it funny that she drew that parallel as well, because it's a perfect parallel.
Well, the old joke, what's the only difference between Scientology and the mafia? Mafia actually goes to church on Sunday.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good one. Okay, and finally, because it's true. It's good because it's true. Tom Cruise. Okay, so Tom Cruise glad handing at the Scientology event last weekend. Lots of photos, lots of stuff shared on social media. I have some comments, but I wanted to get, what did you think about that whole story?
Yeah, well, I wanted to ask you about this too, because what was interesting was the Jive Aces put right on their Facebook page that Jenna Elfman was going to be emceeing the show. And that's how I confirmed what Apostate Alex had heard on a seen on a flyer. So they were pretty open about that. And then Tom flies in his helicopter on Friday. And so I'm thinking, whoa, I bet, it's all hands on deck and Miscavige has called in all the celebs. But then that wasn't the case. I've really only seen photos of Jenna and Tom, and so many of Tom.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
what's
man.
funny is I've only seen one image of Miscavige and it's very blurry. Now I'm sure we'll see
Hmm.
more when they put out Impact Magazine and ISN Magazine, but in 5 or 6 weeks or something. But my question for you, what's interesting to me is, Scientologists, they're very disciplined in certain ways anyway. These Scientologists that went to the IAS on Friday and Saturday were filming themselves walking into the tent, walking to their seat. So we got to see how big the place was, which wasn't very big. And then they have all of these pictures of Tom. I mean, amazing number of pictures of Tom Saturday night. Almost nothing of Miscavige. Now, you think they were very disciplined about not snapping pictures of Dave giving his speech and putting those online, but somebody said, go feel free to put stuff on Tom. Do you think this was because of those? We knew they were nonsense, the tabloid stories about Tom leaving Scientology. I don't know. All I know is I don't think I've ever seen so many photos from in that kind of event posted online so quickly as there
Yeah.
was. And somebody said something about, well, Tom's usually behind a barrier, but there was one photo where you could see that there was a railing. So even though Tom looked like he was all with all these people all around him, he was leaning against the railing, so they couldn't really surround him or anything like that.
Mm.
But yeah, really, really, him glad handing, hanging out with the just just the folks who showed up. There was one photo of him with this French lawyer named Philippe Blanchetier, and there was something about him I thought I should look him up. That sounds interesting. And sure enough, he's a big deal in France. He actually was indicted along with 12 others and President Sarkozy in a campaign financing scam. And that was about 8 years ago, and it's not been resolved. But he was definitely indicted in that. And then in the last couple of years, if you look up his name, he always shows up in these stories where these Russian oligarchs are in trouble who flee to France and stuff, and then he's their attorney. So that's his specialty, I guess. Are the Yeah, and he's mugging
Wow.
with Tom. And my question was, do people in France know that this very well-known national level attorney is a Scientologist? So that
Yeah.
was interesting. I wondered if Tom really knew him, if he was just somebody he posed with. But yeah, what did you think about Tom showing up and all that stuff being blasted to social media so quickly?
Well, I thought it was absolutely intended. That's what I thought. And whether it was Cruz's camp or it was Miscavige directing, Miscavige didn't get in the way. I could see more easily why Tom Cruise would want to glad hand, get photos, get it out there, show up in his helicopter, make sure the Daily Mail, gets that he's a Scientologist. Like, this is one of those, it comes off, at least, maybe I'm totally wrong, but it comes off as an intended PR caper. So that means, setting up a line and getting people and doing the photos and all of that. And Tom Cruise probably is aware, to one degree or another, of Scientology's lack of popularity these days compared to how it was 15, 20 years ago when he thought he was going to be, Scientology Jesus. And that's not, what happened. The exact opposite happened, and I think he's been very frustrated about that as a hardcore Scientologist. He should be. His attitude, if we believe him from what he said earlier, keeping Scientology working, that's a gung-ho, in-your-face activity. It's not a hide behind closed windows thing. I think he's disgusted by that kind of thing. So So I think he was very loud, and I think he was a purposeful, loud and proud out there. He's too stage managed for it to be otherwise.
I think you're right
Miscavige not
because I'm
showing
I'm
up.
I'm thinking back to like 6 or 7 years ago, 2017, 2018. He showed up. We know he showed up, but we would know he showed up because there would be like one photo. I remember one time he was wearing his medal and he was with Rudy Rodriguez, right, the Venezuelan actress, and
Mhm.
it was in London. And it was that weekend. And so you had to conclude, okay, well, he must have been at the patrons ball. Okay, so we have to,
Right.
there's really no other conclusion. But we didn't have pictures of him at the ball and hanging out with people. That's never
Yeah.
happened before that I can remember. So it
I
definitely
think
was a
it's a
big change.
no, I think it's what we said, what we were talking about. It's him reassuring the troops, right? It's these are if the whales are the generals, are the heavy hitters, are the guys who, the made men, so to speak. They can have doubts and reservations and problems and issues with Scientology just like anybody else can. And they can see what's going on in the world, and they can see Scientology in the aftermath, and they can see this stuff. And at least they have people telling them, even if they don't believe it or want to believe it. I'm sure somebody somewhere has been telling some of these guys, what the hell are you doing being wrapped up in Scientology? So Tom Cruise comes in, you're doing the right thing. Because Tom
Right.
Cruise is not David Miscavige. Tom Cruise is
Yeah.
the most successful Scientologist who has ever lived.
Right.
And he's who every single Scientologist wants to be.
Right.
So when he's shaking your hand and telling you you're doing the right thing, it's actually, in a way, even better than Miscavige doing it.
Yeah.
you know?
Well, and then this weekend, Chris, is when the rest of the orgs get to see that, right? The video from the event was shown at the local orgs this weekend. So I would encourage people to keep an eye out on another wave on social media to see if, was Tom featured in that as well? And are people in, Mexico City and Phoenix and Rome talking about, oh, Tom was on the video. He was at the event. I'm so energized. This is so great. So that
Yep.
might be going on this weekend. I don't know. I haven't seen anything yet.
Right. I mean, hell, maybe he got a freedom of metal too. The sequel.
Well, that was my only disappointment. My only disappointment in all those photos. Everyone else was focused on his hair
Right.
and his wrinkles or whatever. I was just sad he didn't have his medal because
Right.
in past years he has worn it to that
Yeah.
event.
Good
Oh
point.
well.
It's something missing. All right. Well, there you are. There's your catch up on the world of Scientology this week, folks. Thanks for coming around and watching us. Now, listen, if you're not subscribed to Tony's Substack, get onto it. Okay. The address is right there on the screen. Subscribe, get your daily notifications. That way you'll be up on what we're talking about. So when you see us next week, you'll be in the loop. All right, folks. Tony, any last words before we wrap up?
This is all. You know what? This next week is already shaping up to be crazy. It's going to be a lot of stuff happening. So keep an eye on the Substack.
All right, guys. So you heard it here. Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Right.